Congressman Tom Kean of New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the morning of Saturday, October 7th, Hamas launched the most brutal and expansive surprise attack on Israel since the Yom Kippur War 50 years ago. And while these attacks may have been perpetrated by Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, let's not forget that the real architects and motivator behind these actions is Iran. I, like many in this committee, support Israel's right to self-defense and stand ready to ensure that it has whatever it needs to ensure its survival. I, like others on this committee, share the concern that any pause will only allow Hamas to continue in its terroristic activities, and we need to be united in our efforts to ensure that we defeat the evil that is Hamas. Can you walk us through a little bit now what are Hamas's current sources of funding, and what diplomatic conversations is the administration having to try to limit funds to Hamas from jurisdictions that previously allowed the funds to flow to this terrorist group?
So we are really constructing a wide-ranging diplomatic effort on this front, and I think that we'll go back to the efforts that we had against ISIS, for instance, or Al Qaeda and other major terrorist organizations. The effort to dry up the funding, to cut it off from both governments but also private donations, is a long sort of trench warfare, and that's what we're going to be doing globally, going around to just restrict and break up.
Are you already doing that? I'm sorry.
We have started on that. Yes, we have.
Okay. And what is your assessment of Hezbollah's current pace of attacks against Israel, and what is Hezbollah hoping to achieve with these attacks?
The current rate of attacks against Israel from its northern border is escalating. What we know is that Hezbollah has an even larger missile arsenal than Hamas.
By orders of magnitude.
By orders of magnitude. And it is seeking to threaten the security of the state of Israel, which is why hundreds of thousands of Israeli citizens have evacuated from the north.
What consequences will Iran face from the U.S. for its support of Hamas?
I would say, first of all, it's not just a question of what consequences Iran will face from the United States. Iran should face consequences from the international community, from the region, and from everyone who shares an interest in a rules-based international order in which a state actor funds non-state actors, arms, trains, equips, and directs them. So it's not just only about what the United States is doing, which is demonstrating a willingness and readiness to use military force multiple times in this administration, and most recently only an hour ago, as well as the increases in force posture, the robust sanctions implementation, and the diplomatic coordination. And we're urging all of our allies and partners as well to impose consequences and costs on Iran for its support for terrorism.
You anticipated my next question, which is regarding the EU and the fact it had a divided response in consequence of these attacks. How are you helping ensure that the EU, as well as going into the issue that that Congressman James talked about at the UN, how are we ensuring that any of these broader organizations are standing up against evil and supporting good?
That's the labor-intensive efforts of diplomatic work, and that's something that we're very focused on. As my colleague said, I would put it in the way that I did with a number of our partners as I worked around the region this past several weeks. This crisis really illuminated starkly for all of them what they all knew intellectually, or they knew through their intelligence, which was Iran had this architecture of proxies. But they all sort of came up on the net, as it were, with this crisis. And you see the Houthis just really desperate to get into the fight. You see the Iraqi militia groups and the threat that they pose in multiple directions, including the state of Iraq. So this has really highlighted for everyone, if they needed highlighting, how destructive this architecture is to everyone's interest. So it is, we'll have some hard conversations with those who are slow to the punch, if you
We
will.
need to have, with respect, successful conversations, not hard conversations.
We don't get credit
Successful.
for trying, we get credit for results. I agree with you, Congressman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Tom Kean. And 8 weeks ago today, I was meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and I gave him the Tom Kean presentation. The American people will stand with Israel, whatever it takes, for their survival. It's appropriate that we conclude with an outstanding freshman, Congressman Mike Lawler of New York.
Thank you, Chairman. Last month, President Biden announced $100 million in humanitarian aid for the Gaza Strip. Obviously, no one wants to see innocent life lost or